most of its history, Starfleet wasn't known for building warships. The Federation's fleet was designed around exploration, diplomacy, scientific discovery, and peaceful cooperation. Even vessels like the legendary Galaxy-class were intended to boldly go where no one had gone before, not dominate a battlefield. However, the late 24th century saw a shift in this design approach. The Borg incursions into Federation space, including the Battle of Wolf 359, showed that Starfleet was not properly equipped for combat. As such, Starfleet's engineers were forced back to the drawing board. When the Borg returned in the Battle of Sector 001, Starfleet was a little more prepared. This time, featuring new designs such as the Sovereign-class, Steamrunner-class, Akira-class, and many more. Even into the late 24th century, Starfleet had even developed the Inquiry-class, another tough design. But that was not the end of the more combat-focused designs. Moving into the early 25th century, one Starship class would emerge that seemed to challenge everything Starfleet traditionally stood for. This was a vessel built for combat. A vessel designed to stand toe-to-toe with Klingon battlecruisers. Also, it was a Starship design carrying some of the most powerful weapons ever fitted to a Federation vessel. This is the Avenger-class Battlecruiser. So, how did Starfleet reach a point where they felt a dedicated battlecruiser was absolutely necessary? What threats pushed the Federation to embrace a more militarized future? And why does the Avenger-class remain one of the most beloved starships ever introduced in Star Trek Online? Today, we're breaking down the USS Avenger and the Avenger-class Battlecruiser. It's time to play Star Trek Online. This year, the free-to-play MMORPG is celebrating its 16th anniversary, which is just in time for the 60th anniversary of the entire Star Trek franchise. The best thing? New storylines keep coming. Thanks to Cryptic Studios and Arc Games for sponsoring this video, Trek Central can tell you about the new season, titled Undiscovered, which has just been released, as well as Star Trek Online's game content. A new major story update beams down of Star Trek Voyager's Robert Picardo as the Doctor, who teams up with Muriel Paris, the daughter of Tom Paris and B'Elanna Torres, to assist in a new Federation proposal for a ceasefire with the Klingon High Council. This mission is titled the Kuva Mag. After years of war with the Federation and the growing threat of Species 8472, the Klingons remain bitter and suspicious. As the player, you'll have to get stuck in and assist. There is also a new in-game event reward, the Cavort Temple Flight Deck Raptor, as seen in Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Lower Decks. You can now get this ship in-game. The new featured in-game mission is available to all players right now, so make it so. Earlier this year, we saw Star Trek Online celebrate its 16th anniversary with a brand new in-game Starship bundle from Star Trek Enterprise. These starships included the likes of the MP Miracle Worker Light Escort and the MV Multi-Mission Temporal Cruiser. However, the bundle exclusive items are the NX Escort refit with an exclusive Drexler visual variant, along with a 2151 Starfleet environmental suit, a Mako phase pistol, and an Andorian plasma rifle. Oh, and there was also the Xindi Primate Atleaf Dreadnought Cruiser, as seen in Star Trek Enterprise. The Star Trek Online 16th Anniversary Bundle is available in-game right now. Star Trek Online allows players to explore the legendary Star Trek universe from within. Players can now chart their own destiny as captain of a Federation starship, champion the Empire through the far reaches of the galaxy as a Klingon warrior, rebuild the Romulan legacy as the commander of a Romulan Republic warbird, or carry out daring missions on behalf of the Dominion as a Jem'Hadar soldier. Explore iconic locations, encounter famous species, and boldly explore the final frontier. In the 16 years the Star Trek MMORPG has been running, it has welcomed dozens of original Star Trek cast members. These include Kate Mulgrew as Catherine Janeway, Gates McFadden as Beverly Crusher, Michael Dorn as Mr. Worf, Jerry Ryan as 7 of 9, and many, many more. Star Trek Online has also explored many eras of the universe, including Enterprise, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, The Next Generation, and even new shows such as Strange New Worlds, Discovery, and Picard, plus many more. You can command a vast fleet of starships from a variety of different factions. Personally, I like taking the Odyssey-class USS Enterprise F out for a spin. This is a big year for Star Trek Online, so are you ready to take command? We'll see you in game. Make it so. Before we begin, it is important to note that the Avenger class currently exists exclusively within the Star Trek Online continuity. While STO draws heavily from established Star Trek canon, and several of its original Starship designs have even appeared on screen in modern Star Trek productions, the Avenger itself has never appeared on screen in the Prime timeline. As such, the history, specifications, and events we'll discuss today should be considered part of a wider Star Trek Online continuity rather than official on-screen canon. The closing years, or rather decades, of the 24th century were among the most turbulent in Federation history. For generations, Starfleet had enjoyed relative stability. Of course, conflicts certainly occurred, and the Federation's ideals of diplomacy and cooperation generally would prevail throughout the Alpha and Beta quadrants. That all changed with the Dominion War. The devastating conflict exposed weaknesses within Starfleet's traditional approach to starship design. Large multi-purpose explorers, like the Galaxy-class, proved vulnerable in modern warfare, while small tactical vessels, like the Defiant-class escort, often found themselves carrying the burden of frontline combat. Although the Federation ultimately emerged victorious, along with the Allied fleet, the lessons of the war were impossible to ignore. The galaxy had become a far more dangerous place. Within Star Trek Online's timeline, those dangers only continued to multiply. By the time the game takes place in 2409, relations with the Klingon Empire had deteriorated rapidly following the collapse of several long-standing political agreements. The destruction of Romulus sent shockwaves throughout the quadrant, creating an instability on a scale not seen since the Dominion War itself. Meanwhile, threats from the Borg Collective, the Undyne, known as Species 8472, and countless regional powers continued to strain Starfleet's resources. The Federation found itself facing a difficult reality. Exploration vessels, alone, could no longer guarantee security. Of course, Starfleet still valued diplomacy and scientific discovery above all else, but it also recognised that peace often required strength. If conflict did erupt once again, the Federation needed ships capable of surviving and winning battles against some of the most dangerous adversaries in the known galaxy. This shift in thinking led Starfleet engineers to explore a new category of vessel. Not a pure escort or traditional cruiser, and certainly not another big explorer. Instead, Starfleet began developing a true battlecruiser. This was a starship designed from the ground up to fight. However, before the Avenger-class could even take shape, another vessel would technically lay the foundation for its creation. This is the Inquiry-class battlecruiser. The earlier 24th century design represented a significant departure from traditional Federation philosophy. It first appeared in the Paramount Plus series of Star Trek Picard. In 2399, William T. Riker would command a fleet of these ships to reinforce his old friend, Jean-Luc Picard. The Inquiry-class was described as one of the most powerful starships Starfleet ever put into service. Of course, Starfleet's Inquiry-class prioritized tactical flexibility, survivability, and combat performance above nearly anything else. Its successes convinced engineers that a larger, more powerful successor could become a backbone of future fleet operations. That successor would become the Avenger-class. This new starship would embody a new era of Federation defense. It would also soon earn a reputation as one of Starfleet's most powerful warships. And just to clarify again, even though the Avenger-class became part of Star Trek Online long before Star Trek Picard ever came out, the lore was changed for the game. Hence why the Inquiry does lead to the Avenger. But the Avenger came out first, just so you're clear. Officially entering service in 2409, the Avenger-class represented Starfleet's most ambitious attempt yet at creating a dedicated combat vessel, without abandoning Federation design principles. At first glance, the Avenger certainly looked like a Starfleet starship. It did feature the familiar saucer section, twin warp nacelles, and a secondary hull configuration that had defined Federation vessels for centuries. But if you look a little closer, however, the differences become immediately apparent. Everything about the Avenger feels more aggressive. The neck connecting to the primary and secondary hulls is thicker and more heavily reinforced. The saucer section appears compressed and streamlined. Weapon hardpoints are prominently visible across the hull, while the nacelles sit on robust support structures that suggest power and durability rather than elegance. This wasn't a vessel intended to chart nebulas or host diplomatic receptions. This was a warship. The Avenger-class measured approximately 425 meters in length and carried a crew complement of around 430 personnel. While it was considerably smaller than vessels such as the Sovereign-class or even the Odyssey-class, the Avenger was specifically designed to maximize combat efficiency rather than internal volume. To put that into perspective, the ship was more than twice the size of the Defiant-class, but significantly smaller than Starfleet's largest explorers. This did allow the Avenger to strike a unique balance between firepower, survivability, and maneuverability. In many ways, it occupied a middle ground between a heavy cruiser and a tactical escort. The result was one of the most versatile combat platforms Starfleet had ever fielded. Naturally, one of the greatest challenges facing Starfleet engineers was powering such a heavily armed vessel. If you remember, the Defiant also had similar issues. Now, the Avenger-class was designed around a rapid pulse matter-antimatter warp core, capable of producing significantly greater plasma output than traditional Starfleet propulsion systems. This enhanced power generation was necessary for a simple reason. The Avenger carried far more weapons, defensive systems, and combat-oriented technologies than a conventional Starfleet ship. Every phaser array, shield emitter, structural integrity field, and auxiliary defense system required enormous amounts of energy. During combat operations, the vessel would often need to maintain multiple high-demand systems simultaneously while continuing to maneuver and also fight. To achieve this, engineers pushed the ship's power systems to their limits. The result was a starship capable of incredible combat performance. However, there was a downside. The increased plasma density and power output made the Avenger's warp core significantly more volatile than those found aboard most Federation vessels. While Starfleet's engineers incorporated numerous safety systems, the Starship class was often described as being exceptionally demanding to operate. The Battlecruiser possessed immense power, but that power did come with a big risk. Now, the Avenger's impressive power output did create another challenge: moving their energy throughout the starship. Traditional EPS conduits and power distribution systems simply weren't designed for the immense demands of a vessel like the Avenger. To compensate, engineers reinforced critical systems throughout the ship and redesigned the nacelle support structures entirely. These strengthened pylons served multiple purposes. Not only did they provide greater structural stability during high-speed maneuvers, but they also protected major EPS conduits that fed power to the warp engines and tactical systems. According to Starfleet's engineers, the vessel's overall power output was so high that extensive modifications were required simply to maintain safe operational limits. In many respects, the Avenger was operating at the very edge of what Starfleet technology could safely sustain at this point in time. But this is exactly what Starfleet wanted. Of course, none of that power generation would even matter if a ship couldn't deliver a devastating offensive capability. Fortunately, this is where the Avenger truly excelled. The Battlecruiser carried an extensive array of Mark 12 phaser arrays, distributed across the hull, allowing it to engage targets from multiple angles simultaneously. These phasers form the backbone of a vessel's offensive arsenal and provided excellent coverage in virtually every combat scenario. However, Starfleet engineers didn't stop there. The Avenger also mounted heavy phaser cannons. This was a notable departure from traditional Starfleet design philosophy. Heavy cannons had previously been most famously employed aboard the Defiant-class escort, where they provided concentrated forward firepower capable of devastating enemy vessels. By integrating similar weapons into the Avenger-class, Starfleet significantly increased the ship's offensive potential. These cannons allowed the vessel to unleash devastating alpha strikes against hostile targets, while retaining the flexibility of traditional phaser arrays. To further improve combat effectiveness, the Avenger was also equipped with an aft phaser turret. This ensured that hostile vessels attempting to attack from behind would still find themselves under constant fire. Combined together, these systems made the Battlecruiser one of the most heavily armed Federation starships of this era. Like many advanced Starfleet vessels, the Avenger-class carried quantum torpedoes as part of its standard weapons complement. These weapons had become a mainstay of Federation tactical doctrine following the Dominion War, and provided significantly greater destructive capabilities than earlier photon torpedoes. Yet the vessel was still able to use photon torpedoes as well. But even these powerful weapons were not the Avenger's most unique feature. That honour belonged to the Variable Auto-Targeting Armament, better known as the VATA or V8A or VATA for short. The VATA was a specialised ship killer weapon designed to destroy heavily defended targets. Unlike conventional torpedoes, the VATA utilised miniature targeting sensors, advanced guidance systems, and electronic countermeasure technology to improve its chances of reaching its target. In essence, it was a smart weapon designed to survive long enough to deliver a devastating payload. The launcher itself was mounted beneath the vessel's main deflector dish, making it one of the most distinctive external features of the class. Within Star Trek Online, the VATA would become one of the Avenger-class's most recognizable tactical systems, further cementing the vessel's reputation as a dedicated combat platform. Despite its tremendous firepower, the Avenger was never intended to be a glass cannon. Starfleet understood that as a true battlecruiser, it would need to survive prolonged engagements. To accomplish this, the vessel incorporated numerous advanced defensive technologies. One of the most important was deployable ablative armor. Yes, this is the same type of armor you may have seen the USS Voyager use in the series finale. When activated, additional armor placing could protect critical systems and improve the vessel's survivability during intense combat situations. This technology had already proven effective on other Federation vessels, and offered a valuable extra layer of protection. The ship also utilized reinforced structural integrity fields, auxiliary shield generators, and advanced damage control systems. Together, these technologies allowed the Battlecruiser to absorb punishment that would cripple many comparable vessels. Enemy commanders quickly learned that destroying an Avenger-class ship was far easier said than done. Even when heavily damaged, the vessel often retained enough combat capabilities to remain a serious threat. Perhaps one of the most controversial features associated with the USS Avenger and its class was its cloaking technology. For decades, the Federation's use of cloaking devices had been heavily restricted by the Treaty of Algernon, an agreement that prohibited Starfleet from developing or deploying such systems. However, the political landscape of the 21st century was very, very different from that of the previous generation. Within Star Trek Online's timeline, the collapse of the Romulan Star Empire fundamentally changed the strategic situation. With the original Romulan Star Empire government effectively gone, and the Treaty of Algernon increasingly irrelevant, Starfleet Admiralty officials authorized the deployment of cloaking technology aboard certain vessels. Among them was the USS Avenger. The decision was controversial. Many within Starfleet argued that cloaking devices contradicted Federation principles of openness and transparency. Others believed the changing realities of the galaxy demanded new approaches. Regardless of where one stood in that debate, the presence of a cloak further highlighted how different the Avenger-class truly was, from the old explorers that had defined Starfleet for centuries. This was a vessel built for survival, a vessel built for combat. And perhaps most importantly, it was a vessel built for a galaxy that had become far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. By 2409, the Avenger-class had finally moved from a drawing board to active service. Leading the class was the vessel that gave the design its name, the USS Avenger, registry NCC 97500. As the prototype and lead ship of the class, the Avenger represented everything Starfleet hoped its new Battlecruiser program would achieve. It combined impressive firepower, modern defensive systems, and advanced tactical flexibility into a single platform, capable of responding to some of the most dangerous threats facing the Federation. Unlike many Starfleet vessels that spent their early years exploring deep space or conducting scientific missions, the USS Avenger was immediately viewed as a strategic military asset. The ship's role was very clear from the beginning. It was intended to protect the Federation. Throughout the early years of its service life, the Avenger frequently operated from Earth's space dock, serving as both a flagship example of its class and a symbol of Starfleet's evolving defensive doctrine. While Starfleet remained committed to exploration and diplomacy, the Avenger demonstrated that the Federation was no longer willing to be caught unprepared. Now, the USS Avenger's most notable appearance comes during the events of the Delta Rising expansion. By this point, the political situation across the galaxy has become increasingly unstable. Numerous powers were attempting to undermine the growing cooperation between the members of the Delta Alliance, therefore creating new danger throughout the region. During operations, a Federation shuttlecraft found itself caught in a trap. Fortunately for the shuttle crew, help was already on the way. Responding to a distress call, the Avenger arrived in the system and intervened before the situation could deteriorate further. Using its impressive tactical capabilities, the Battlecruiser helped rescue the stranded personnel and neutralize the threat. While not the largest engagement in Federation history, the incident perfectly demonstrated the role Starfleet envisioned for this Starship class. The Avenger wasn't designed to spend years conducting survey missions at the edge of explored space. It was designed to respond rapidly to crises and ensure Starfleet personnel made it home alive. Rewinding time, one of the primary reasons the Avenger-class existed at all was the deteriorating relations between the Federation and the Klingon Empire. Within Star Trek Online's timeline, the collapse of the Khitomer Accords and the outbreak of renewed hostilities created a situation where Starfleet could no longer rely solely upon traditional cruiser designs. The Klingon Defense Force possessed numerous powerful battlecruisers specifically designed for warfare. And while Federation vessels had proven capable during previous conflicts, Starfleet leadership recognized that it would need ships purpose-built for combat operations. The Avenger-class became one answer to that problem. As tensions increased, additional vessels of the class entered service and were being distributed throughout key Federation sectors. Their mission was straightforward: deter aggression, defend strategic assets, and if diplomacy failed, stand alongside the rest of Starfleet in combat. The USS Avenger may have been the most famous member of its class. Of course, it was the lead ship, but it was far from alone. As production increased, multiple Avenger-class vessels would join Starfleet. Among the best known was the USS Bellipotent. Like the Avenger herself, this vessel was frequently assigned to critical defensive operations around the Sol system. During the Species 8472 crisis, the vessel was stationed at Earth's space dock, ready to assist in the defense of the Federation's capital should the situation escalate further. Another notable vessel was the USS Justicar. Following the fragmentation of the Klingon Empire, the Justicar remained stationed near Earth as Starfleet monitored the rapidly changing political situation. The ship represented the continued importance of the Avenger-class as a strategic reserve force capable of responding to unexpected threats. Then there was the USS Finder. Of all the known Avenger-class vessels, the Finder arguably experienced some of the most dramatic combat operations. This was in the defense of Deep Space Nine. In 2409, the USS Finder was assigned to Deep Space Nine. At the time, the station was hosting the International Conference on the Borg, bringing together representatives from across the quadrant to discuss one of the greatest threats in galactic history. Unfortunately, the event would soon take a disastrous turn. A massive Jem'Hadar force emerged from the Bajoran wormhole, threatening Deep Space Nine and countless civilian evacuation vessels operating nearby. The numbers involved were staggering. Thousands of Dominion vessels poured into the Alpha Quadrant, creating one of the most dangerous situations the station had faced since the Dominion War itself. Caught in the middle of a crisis, the USS Finder joined the desperate effort to defend the station and protect fleeing civilians. Despite the Battlecruiser's impressive capabilities, the scale of the attack was overwhelming. Only through intervention of Allied forces was the disaster ultimately avoided. For the crew of the Finder, it serves as a stark reminder that even one of Starfleet's most powerful warships could not face every threat alone. Later, the Undyne threat continued to grow. The Finder once again found itself on the front lines. This time, the vessel joined an expedition led by Rear Admiral Tuvok. Their destination was one of the most dangerous regions known to Starfleet, fluidic space. This mysterious realm was inhabited by Species 8472, known as the Undyne. They had long remained beyond the Federation understanding. However, the increase in Undyne activity forced Starfleet to investigate further. The Finder participated in these operations alongside numerous Federation, Klingon, and Romulan vessels. The mission highlighted another strength of the Avenger-class. While designed primarily for warfare, it still retained enough flexibility to support reconnaissance, escort, and expeditionary operations far from Federation territory. In many ways, this perfectly reflected Starfleet's ongoing balancing act. The Avenger was unquestionably a warship, but it was still a Starfleet ship. By the early 2410s, the Avenger-class had firmly established itself as one of Starfleet's premier combat vessels. The ship had participated in major conflicts, defended key Federation installations, and proven themselves capable of standing alongside the finest vessels in the Federation fleet. Yet, despite these successes, Starfleet engineers were already looking towards the future, because beyond the horizon, a new threat was emerging. One that would force every major power in the Alpha and Beta quadrants to rethink how they fought wars. And that threat would ultimately lead to the development of an even more advanced successor to the Avenger-class, this being the Arbiter-class battlecruiser. Of course, we are mainly talking about the Avenger-class, but it's worth talking about the successor because it does sort of operate as a subclass. When the Avenger-class entered service in 2409, it represented more than just another addition to Starfleet's fleet roster. For generations, Starfleet had primarily built vessels intended to explore the unknown. Even during periods of conflict, most Federation starships remained multi-role platforms, capable of scientific research, diplomacy, and exploration, alongside their defensive duties. The Avenger-class challenged that philosophy. While still retaining many traditional Starfleet capabilities, its primary purpose was clear. This wasn't an escort designed to support larger vessels, nor was it a science ship pressed into military service. The Avenger was a battlecruiser from the keel up. It was designed to project power and defend Federation territory, but also stand on front lines during major conflicts. In many ways, it represented Starfleet's attempt to apply the lessons learned from decades of warfare. Despite its success, the Avenger-class entered service during one of the most dangerous periods in modern galactic history. New threats were emerging from nearly every direction. The Borg remained active, the Undine continued their infiltration efforts. Political instability spread throughout the former Romulan territories. And looming over everything was the growing threat of the Iconians. As Starfleet gathered intelligence on the ancient civilization, it became increasingly clear that existing vessels would eventually require further development to face the challenges ahead. The Avenger-class was powerful, but Starfleet knew it could do even better. The eventual result of its design dream was the Arbiter-class Battlecruiser. It was introduced as a direct evolution of the Avenger-class design, and the Arbiter-class incorporated years of operational experience and battlefield data gathered from the Avengers' service history. Rather than completely replacing Avengers' philosophy, Starfleet engineers refined it. The new vessel retained the Battlecruiser's emphasis on tactical flexibility, survivability, and overwhelming firepower, while improving overall performance across the board. Visually, the similarities are immediately obvious. The two ships do share a common design language and clearly belong to the same family of vessels. Yet the Arbiter appears sleeker, more refined, and better optimized for the increasingly dangerous conflicts facing the Alpha Quadrant. In many ways, the Arbiter represents the final evolution of the ideas first explored by the Inquiry and then the Avenger-class. Speaking of the Inquiry, of course, modern Star Trek fans would often compare the Avenger-class to a well-known Federation warship, being the Inquiry-class. This did first appear in Star Trek Picard, but the Inquiry-class became famous as a backbone of Starfleet's late 24th and early 25th century fleets. And no, I'm not talking about the copy-paste fleet, because yeah, try making sense of that one. Although the Inquiry-class exists within the Prime timeline, while the Avenger-class remains exclusive to Star Trek Online, comparisons between the two ships are inevitable. The official Star Trek Online Starships collection describes the Avenger-class as based on the 2390s era Inquiry-class Battlecruiser. Both vessels reflect a more tactical Starfleet. Both place a greater emphasis on fleet operations and combat readiness. And ultimately, both demonstrate how Starfleet priorities evolved following decades of conflict. While there is no official connection between the two classes in Star Trek canon, many do view them as exploring with similar design philosophies from different continuities. Each offers a unique interpretation of what a modern Federation warship might actually look like. Ultimately, the Avenger-class represents one of the most interesting concepts ever explored in Star Trek Online. It asks a simple question: what does happen when Starfleet decides it needs a battlecruiser? The answer was a vessel capable of standing alongside the most powerful warships in the galaxy, while still retaining the values that define the Federation. The Avenger-class wasn't built because Starfleet abandoned its ideals. It was built because Starfleet believed those ideals were worth defending, and that philosophy helped make the Avenger-class one of the most memorable ships ever introduced in Star Trek Online. Let's look at the behind the scenes of the Avenger-class, because creating the ship wasn't as simple as giving a Starfleet ship more weapons and calling it a day. In fact, the design team at Star Trek Online faced a surprisingly difficult challenge. How do you create a Federation battlecruiser? It's a question that does sound straightforward at first, but it does quickly become complicated when you consider Star Trek design history. Federation vessels have traditionally been elegant. They're sleek, optimistic, and refined. Even Starfleet's most powerful warships tend to maintain a sense of grace and sophistication. The Avenger needed to be different. Finding balance becomes one of the biggest challenges facing the design team. If they push too far toward military aesthetics, the ship risks looking more Klingon than Federation. If they stayed too close to traditional Starfleet designs, the vessel wouldn't feel like a true battlecruiser. The final result sits somewhere between the two extremes: a starship that feels distinctly Federation while still looking capable of leading an assault into the heart of enemy territory. When development began, the design team looked extensively at existing Star Trek vessels for inspiration. Of course, one of the most obvious influential ships was the Defiant-class. Although much smaller than the Avenger was going to be, the Defiant had proven that Starfleet could successfully create a dedicated combat vessel, without abandoning Federation design principles. The Defiant's aggressive stance, exposed weapon systems, and heavily armoured appearance all helped shape the philosophy behind the Avenger. Another major influence was the Akira-class. Introduced in Star Trek First Contact, the Akira featured a more militarised appearance than many earlier Federation ships. Its broad profile, heavy torpedo armament, and robust structure made it an ideal reference point when designing a larger battlecruiser. Elements of the Sovereign class can also be seen throughout the Avenger's design language. The sleek secondary hull, tactical appearance, and emphasis on combat performance all helped inform the vessel's overall aesthetic. Then there was the Odyssey-class. As Star Trek Online's flagship Federation vessel, given it's the Enterprise F, the Odyssey represented the pinnacle of modern Starfleet engineering. The Avenger borrowed several design cues from the Odyssey, particularly in the way the saucer and secondary hull integrate together. Yet perhaps one of the most surprising influences comes from a very different starship. Many fans have noticed similarities between the Avenger's saucer section and the Prometheus class seen in Star Trek Voyager. This was no accident. The Prometheus had already demonstrated how Starfleet could create a vessel that prioritized tactical capabilities while maintaining a recognizably Federation silhouette. For the design team, it did serve as an excellent source of inspiration. One of the lesser-known influences on the Avenger class can be traced back to a fan design competition. In 2011, Creative Studios launched the famous Design the Next Enterprise contest. The goal was simple: create a design worthy of becoming the next USS Enterprise. Thousands of submissions were received from talented artists and Star Trek fans around the world. Eventually, the Odyssey-class design emerged victorious and became the USS Enterprise F. However, not every submitted design was suitable for the Enterprise itself. Some concepts explored more aggressive and militaristic approaches to Federation starship design. One particular submission by artist Corey Calloway attracted the attention of the Star Trek Online development team. Although it wasn't selected as the next Enterprise, elements of its design philosophy would later help inspire discussions about what a true Federation battlecruiser could look like. The idea ultimately evolved into the Avenger-class. In this way, the ship owes part of its existence to the creativity of Star Trek fans themselves. The individual most closely associated with bringing the Avenger-class to life was Star Trek Online artist Adam Gibson. One of the terms he frequently used when describing the Avenger was a gunship. And when you look at the final design, it is easy to understand why. Unlike many Starfleet vessels, where weapons are subtly integrated into the hull, the Avenger proudly displays its offensive capabilities. Weapon hardpoints are clearly visible. The ship's stance appears aggressive. The hull plating looks reinforced. Everything about the vessel does communicate its purpose. This was a ship designed to fight. Yet despite these changes, Gibson and the team remained determined to preserve a Federation identity. The Avenger couldn't simply be a Klingon battlecruiser with Starfleet nacelles attached, though that would look a bit weird. It needed to feel like a natural evolution of Federation starship design. Finding that balance required countless revisions through the development. One of the easiest ways to understand the Avenger's design philosophy is to compare it directly to other Starfleet vessels. Many Federation ships feature large, exposed windows and relatively thin connecting structures. The Avenger takes the opposite approach. The windows are recessed into the hull, the neck is thicker, and the nacelle pylons appear heavily reinforced. The overall silhouette is more compact and muscular. These choices were intentional. The design team wanted players to look at the ship and immediately understand its role. This wasn't a vessel built for luxury. This wasn't a flying science laboratory or even for diplomacy. This was a battlecruiser. Even the whole plating was designed to reinforce that impression. Star Trek Online ships were known for their highly detailed surface textures, and the Avenger takes full advantage of that design language. Strong panel lines, reinforced sections, and visible armor details all help create the impression of a vessel built to survive combat. Whether those features generally improve survivability is another question entirely. But visually, they succeed in making the Avenger look like one of the toughest starships Starfleet ever produced. More than a decade after its introduction, the Avenger-class remains one of the most popular Federation ships in Star Trek Online. Part of her popularity does come from its gameplay performance. The vessel quickly earned a reputation as an exceptionally effective battlecruiser capable of handling a wide variety of combat scenarios. But performance alone doesn't explain its lasting appeal. For many players, the Avenger represents something unique within Star Trek. It's a ship that explores a fascinating question. What does happen when Starfleet fully commits to building another, proper, bigger warship? The result isn't a vessel that abandons Federation ideals. Instead, it's a starship that adapts those ideals to a more dangerous galaxy. The concept does resonate with many fans, particularly those who've enjoyed stories centered around the Dominion War, the Defiant class, and Starfleet's more tactical side. Even today, the Avenger remains one of the most recognizable original starship designs in Star Trek Online. And perhaps that's the greatest compliment any starship can receive. Because, despite never appearing on screen, many fans consider it just as memorable as some of Star Trek's canon vessels. I've actually got a model of it here in my office. So, the Avenger-class Battlecruiser does occupy a fascinating place in Star Trek history. Existing entirely within the continuity of Star Trek Online, it still represents an alternate vision of where Starfleet's design philosophy might have gone following decades of war, political instability, and growing threats across the galaxy. Built upon the foundations laid by the Inquiry-class, and eventually succeeded by the Arbiter-class, the Avenger became one of the Federation's premier combat vessels. A ship capable of standing alongside Klingon battlecruisers, defending Federation space, and confronting threats that traditional explorers were never designed to face. Yet despite its heavy weapons, advanced armor, and battlecruiser designation, the Avenger never completely abandoned its Starfleet roots. It remained a symbol of a Federation trying to balance its ideals with the realities of an increasingly dangerous galaxy. And perhaps that's why the ship remains so popular with Trekkies today. But what do you think of the Avenger-class Battlecruiser? Would you choose it as your command in Star Trek Online, or do you prefer one of Starfleet's more traditional starship designs? Let us know down below in the comments. As always, if you're talking about Star Trek, we want to hear about it. For now, I've been Jack here on Trek Central. Thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. A big thank you to our patrons for supporting the channel. And we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends. Goodbye.